Welcome back to the Digital Imaging channel. I'm Will, and today we're going to be talking about microfilm scanning and indexing. Microfilm is a pretty unique and nuanced type of material, so that's why we're specifically talking about that and indexing today. And because microfilm does hold so much information on an individual roll, which can be anywhere between 1,000 to 10 or 15, 20,000 images, it can be tempting to want to digitally name or index every single individual file. But finding that information, each of those individual files, can be difficult, complex, and potentially costly. On the other hand, you could go forward with just roll level indexing, the simpler method, but then you might feel like I should have done more. I could index to a deeper level and make this easier on the back end when I'm actually searching for these. So what we're going to talk about today are the two most common methods of indexing your microfilm, so you have a good idea of what they mean, what they entail, and when it might be a fit for your situation. The first method is called roll level indexing, and it's called that because you are taking the information from the roll, from the box container, and applying that to the entire roll. Let's say you work at a library and you have about 500 rolls of local titles, and you have that collection of microfilm that your patrons come in to use, your staff helps them use. They're used to finding the roll itself, the physical roll, putting it on a reader, and then searching for the information they need. So it is familiar in the sense that they know how to use it now. So you replicate that digitally, there's no change in finding it physically and digitally, except it's inherently faster since it is digital. So again, this is the simplest place to start because you're replicating how the physical microfilm is found, the information on the microfilm, and it's also the most cost effective because you're going to be capturing the fewest number of index points when you replicate the roll level. The second method is called file level indexing, and that's when you're going to be looking for actual files in that roll. So you're not going to be capturing the information from the roll label. You may capture that to have some sort of hierarchy, some folder structure within your document management system, but then you're going to be going onto the individual images on that roll. If you're using our digital reel application, we call this bookmarking because you're basically finding places on the roll that we ping as this is the spot where the file starts. So you still have the actual roll virtually shown, but then you are going to each individual file on that roll. But whichever method you use, if you're getting the traditional method like PDFs or TIFFs, or using our digital reel system, the different ways you can index the file level may be something like a physical spacer on that microfilm. If you're looking at a strip of microfilm, occasionally there will be a big blank gap. There'll be no image, which is a very easy identifier to say this is the stop of a file and the beginning of the next one. There's a big gap between images. You may have something like a flasher sheet, an eye-readable sheet that may just say something like big number one, then you have image, just normal office text, whatever it is, and then a big number 2, then 10, 15, 20 images, then number 3. So you can easily tell that that flasher sheet begins the next file. If you don't have the spacers or flasher sheets of some sort, then you might have some sort of fairly identifiable, easily identifiable beginning of a file, such as, let's go back to that library microfilm instance where it's newspaper microfilm. The beginning of a file would be an issue date. So if you're scrolling along and you see the beginning of an issue, so January 1st, 1975, you'll know that's the start of a file because it's a new issue. And then 10, 15, 20 pages later, however long the issue is, you'll see January 8th. Let's say it's a weekly. Then you'll see January 15th, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So even though you have to look at every single image, you know that's a very identifiable beginning of a document. Another method is blips. Those are those little things at the bottom of an image that they're on the microfilm itself, very identifiable, eye-readable. It's on the microfilm underneath an image. You have single level blips, which are the really small ones, and then you can tell if there are double level blips on your microfilm because they're a little bit wider, and that typically indicates that that's the beginning of the file, and all the single level blips behind it until the next double level are part of that file. And if there's not an easily identifiable or eye-readable method of finding when a file starts and stops, we will have to go in and look at every single image. And this is when file level indexing can become pretty expensive because you can imagine someone has to sit there and look at every single scanned image and determine if this is the beginning of a document or the end of a document, or however we're defining the indexing for your project. If on your microfilm there is not some sort of easily identifiable or eye-readable indicator that a document starts or stops and what's included in that file, then we will most likely have to go into that microfilm and look at every single scanned image to then identify when that file begins and ends. You can imagine this is pretty expensive if a human has to sit there and look and determine this is the beginning of a file or it's not. I need to look at the image, figure figure out, is that the right information we're capturing, or is that just a, let's say, date of birth? Is that really the date of birth, or is that a different date that's just stamped on the file? Okay, I need to keep looking, go to the next image. You're looking at 2,500 images on a standard microfilm roll. If you have 1,000 microfilm rolls in your project, that's 1,000 index points. If you're doing file level indexing, you have 1,000 rolls, that could be 1,000 rolls times X number of index points. Are you capturing every 10th page maybe? That's 1,000 times 10 index points. Maybe you're capturing something on every single page. That's 1,000 times 2,500 index points. And that's just a standard microfilm roll. You can see how that can extrapolate into a much more expensive project, potentially, depending on what the requirements are for your indexing. When I'm working with clients, what I like to recommend is basically replicate what you're doing now and try that first. So if you have that 1,000 rolls of microfilm, you're thinking, I just really want to go in there. I want to do file level indexing because it's just gonna be great. I can find a file immediately and don't have to look around. That sounds great, but you don't know how complex it would be and maybe how expensive it can get. So what you can do is do roll level indexing. It's gonna be inherently faster just because it's digital. So although you still have to, you'll find the roll and then you'll still have to look for the information, it's gonna be faster because it's digital. You're not getting it out of a cabinet, you're not putting it on a microfilm machine, scrolling around, printing out files, whatever that old method was. You're just going to that digital file, quickly scrolling for what you need, finding it, and then exporting it. And if you have OCR text search in your PDFs or on digital reel, you can quickly search for that too. You don't even need the index points. Sometimes you can eliminate even having to do the file level indexing because text search gets you close enough or potentially right to the file you need. That's a great way to look at this too, is if you replicate what you do now, add text search, you might be able to find 95, 99% of what you need without even scrolling around too much. What it comes down to is you don't want to go too wild on indexing just because you can. Just because you can doesn't mean you necessarily should. What I like to call is the building block approach. Get the roll level indexing, see how it works. If it works fine, you think, yeah, I don't need to spend anymore. I don't need to do any more to make this effective. Great, you're done. But if you think, yeah, this is great, instead of spending 15 minutes per request with the physical microfilm, I only spend 2 minutes per request now using the digital method, but I'd like to spend about 10 seconds by going right to the file. If that juice is worth the squeeze to you, then you have the digital files, you already have roll level, you didn't go forward and already create an index system. You can go another step and get more detailed indexing. You could always do more. It's like cutting hair. You can always cut more, you can't cut less. Now going back to Digital Reel, our hosting platform, well first, we love it. We think it's great and it's very useful for microfilm. It was originally created for that. But one of the major benefits of having your microfilm scanned either as the primary access or maybe a backup in Digital Reel is you keep that historical context. We're virtually replicating the film in Digital Reel. It's like if you're holding up the roll of film, that's what it looks like in Digital Reel. But you have all the benefits of the digitization. You go to the files, you have text search, you have bookmarking, so forth, so forth. But the critical part is that historical context. So if you do decide to index to a file level or you keep it roll level, whatever you decide to do, you can always go back and see how the microfilm looked originally. So let's say you parse out the files, you start exporting things, you load it to a different management system, you think, why did we do it this way? Now I'm not sure where'd that file come from, why is it named this way? Whatever it is, if you have Digital Reel, you can always go back to the digital replica of the microfilm and historical context. Now, could you keep the physical microfilm and have that? Of course. But you probably don't want to keep the physical microfilm because it's kind of a pain. You have to deal with handling the records and storage and all that. So this alleviates that, gives you the historical context, and gives you that backup or primary access, regardless of which indexing method you do. That's it. Microfilm scanning indexing doesn't have to be too spooky. Keep it simple, iterate, improve, and find out what works best for you and use that building block approach to make sure you're getting what you want. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to our channel to get more videos like this and get notified about them, and I'll see you next time.